Good afternoon. Thanks for coming out. I know it's kind of a hazy day out there. I actually arranged this special for this talk because I wanted to have a good visual description for you of what it looks like to go VFR into IMC. Does anybody have the current weather? Anybody been looking at it? Last time I looked, it was 3 miles in haze, forecast for 6 miles in haze. And this is all, most of it is all due to the smoke out from the fires out west coming our way. So, my name is John Collins. I'm the manager of aviation safety programs for the AOPA Air Safety Institute. And I'm going to talk to you today about strategies for avoiding VFR into IMC accidents. So let's get started. The FAA defines VFR into IMC as that any time a VFR pilot is unable to maintain airplane attitude control by reference to the natural horizon, regardless of the circumstances or the prevailing weather conditions. What does that sound like maybe they're trying to incorporate into that definition? This is the after lunch seminar, so I'm going to ask some questions. We'll go back and forth a little bit. Smoke haze, okay, what else? Mists, what else? What about after dark? Would nighttime possibly qualify? Depends on where you're flying, right? I live in West Virginia. If I go out to the west, I go over the mountain ridge and there's few lights out there, and if I head in the right direction, I go into a big black hole. I'm looking at my instruments. So they go on further. This definition comes out of the Airplane Flying Handbook. They go on further to say that additionally, the VFR pilot is in effect in IMC anytime he or she is inadvertently or intentionally, for an indiscriminate period of time, unable to navigate or establish geographical position by visual reference to landmarks on the surface. And this is the FAA saying this next statement here too. These situations must be accepted by the pilot as a genuine emergency requiring appropriate action. So VFR into IMC is an emergency. Don't hesitate to declare one if you get yourselves into that. We're going to talk about that as we go through the presentation here. We take a look at this accident statistics for the last 11 years, 2008 to 2018. We see that in GA fixed-wing non-commercial aircraft, 261 accidents. VFR into IMC was the causal factor. Of those, 244 were fatal. That's an 86% lethality rate. And so it is probably the worst weather accident in terms of fatalities that we have, and that is year after year after year. So people keep flying VFR into IMC and they kill themselves. And it's not just VFR rated pilots. So before I go too much further, let me take a quick poll of the audience. How many student pilots do we have out there? Okay. How many VFR only private pilots? All right. Instrument rated private pilots. Okay. Any commercial or ATP pilots? A couple of you, 3 of you, okay, great. Any flight instructors? 1, 2, okay. All right, so fully 1/3 of the accident, the fatal accident pilots are instrument rated, which means that they're not current or they're not proficient or they did something that they didn't make a good decision. They ended up in this VFR into IMC condition and they killed themselves. On the rotary wing side of the house, they call it unintentional IMC, UIMC. They had 32 accidents over that same time period. 20 of those were fatal. A little bit less lethality, but still a very significant number. And so, we want to really try to focus on how can we reduce that number. But wait, there's more. There we go. In that same time period, there were 224 NASA reports, the Aviation Safety Reporting System, ASRS reports, of personal Part 91 VFR into IMC encounters. Well, what does that tell us? 224 pilots survived. Lived to tell about it, lived to submit a NASA form so we can learn from that. So what were the differences? Why is this survivable for some and not survivable for others? So let's take a look at that. Maybe was it a quicker realization of the emergency that they were in? Did they reach out for help sooner? Perhaps they had better training. maybe it was just a willingness to act. I've got to do something and I need to do something now. Let me make this decision. Perhaps they had good planning. They thought about things before they launched. They had it out. Or were they just plain lucky? I'd like to think not just plain lucky. I'd like to think that they had some training and some experience, and they were willing to reach out to get the help that they needed. We're going to talk about a case study that I pulled out of the ASRS. This comes from December 2018. The pilot was a private pilot, instrument rated. We're not really sure if the pilot was current or not at the time of the incident, but it was not stated in the report. But it was a day VFR flight in a Cherokee PA-28. It was a flight that the pilot had made numerous times. In fact, very familiar with the route, had flown it, and was actually repositioning or flying back home. So there's a little bit of pressure to get home, going back to their home base. About 150 nautical miles, and the weather was okay. At the departure point, 9 nautical miles of visibility with a 3,000-foot overcast. That's VFR, right? Yeah, okay. And at the destination, 10 miles with clear skies, that's VFR. But in between, there was a single reporting point, and they were reporting 9 miles visibility with an 1,100-foot overcast. VFR? Yeah, it's still VFR. What do we need for VFR? Say again? 1,000 feet, 3 miles visibility. That's VFR. Is it good VFR? No, it's what? It's marginal VFR. It's kind of what we've got here today. We've got that reduced visibility. Okay, they're saying the skies are clear here. Okay, but the visibility is down less than 5 miles at the moment. Might have gone up a little bit since I last looked. But when the pilot was looking at the weather, and they checked the weather on their Garmin pilot app, and then went online to 1-800-weatherbrief.com to get an update. They looked at this information. I don't know exactly what they looked at specifically. The pilot did not state all the sources that were reviewed, but he saw enough to consider, okay, I need to have an escape plan. My escape plan is I'm going to turn around if I get into trouble. Now, it was not defined in the report what that turnaround point was going to be or where that decision was going to be made, what were the criteria that would trigger that turnaround, but if it got worse or bad, I'm going to go back to where I started from. So he launches and he flies east, and about 10 miles into his flight, the weather starts to deteriorate. Now he's looking at 5 miles visibility, a 2,000-foot overcast. It's lowered down, and along the route of flight, there's a mountain ridge on the left and an active restricted area to the right, and not enough room to turn around. Plus, if the pilot climbs and gets into the clouds, and while he's got a rating, may not feel comfortable or current to do that. So decides, I'm not going to turn around, I'm going to continue, I'll stay at 1,500 feet AGL, I'll keep flying along, and hopefully things will work out. Because, again, being familiar with the route, knew that at some point he's going to come out on the other side of that mountain range in the restricted area, and it's going to be flatter terrain, and he'll have a little bit more maneuverability. And so he gets out into that flat area, but as he continues flying along, the weather continues to deteriorate. Slowly, over the next 80 miles, the weather comes down, little bit by little bit. And so as he's flying, and the clouds, the ceiling is lowering, noses over about 50 feet each time, until finally, about 50 miles from the destination, realizes that he's in a pickle. He's now 600 feet AGL. If he goes up 100 feet, he's in the clouds. So he's in what kind of conditions do we have now? By definition, IMC, right? Okay. And the visibility is between 2 and 3 miles. So he's got some work, and he's been working hard, looking at his tablet, looking outside, trying to control the airplane, and on his route of flight, he's approaching a highway, And along the highway, there are lots of towers, about 300 feet AGL. So now it becomes a game of dodgeball or dodge tower, right? Should probably declare an emergency. I mean, you're sitting here nice and safe and comfortable on a nice warm summer afternoon thinking about this going, yeah, I would probably call ATC and say, yeah, I need help. I got to get out of here. He's a little busy. He's aviating and he's navigating. He has no time to communicate because he's trying, like I said, dodge those towers that are coming up at him fast and furious as he's going towards his destination. And then, as he continues along, the visibility continues to drop, and it goes down to 1 nautical mile in about 10 seconds. It had been about, according to his report, 3 nautical miles, and it went to 3, to 2, to 1 in about the space of the time it just took me to describe that. As he's flying along, he sees a farmhouse go zipping past him out the window. Oh my goodness, I am way too close to that house. I need to deal with this right now. And as soon as that thought crosses the mind, bam, into the clouds, he's in IMC. Now what? Well, his training kicks in. He recalls from his private training and from some of his instrument training that he's going to make a 180-degree turn. And so, starts to turn using a 20-degree bank turn. That's okay, except that he starts to feel uncomfortable with it like he did in his early instrument training, according to the report. Started to get a little disoriented, started to feel a little concerned about this thing working out. And the loss of control is imminent. So, and again, he's thinking about, I'm at 600 feet AGL, I haven't slowed down, I'm at 140 miles an hour flying along here, and I'm turning back towards that last tower I just turned away from. Wow, I need to regain my composure, I need to do something. So levels the wings, flies straight and level for a moment or two, and then begins a 5-degree climb to get into the clouds and hopefully get out of them. According to the report, what he was telling us was that it seemed like it took forever, but it was probably about 2 or 3 minutes, and it started to lighten up in his windscreen, and then eventually he popped out on top, 4,000 feet MSL, above him, clear skies. Towards his destination in about 10 nautical miles, the cloud deck goes away. So he can complete his flight. He can go the rest of the way to his destination without any problems. Along the way, there was a Class C airport and airspace, so he gets flight following to get through there, and when he contacted ATC, he says he didn't confess that he had been VFR into IMC. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then he landed safely, and then fortunately for us and for our seminar today and for you and everybody else, he filed a NASA report so we could learn from it. Now, NASA reports are good. They give us information about things that could have been accidents but weren't, things that need to be improved, safety hazards that we can work on. And one of the things we're doing at the Air Safety Institute is we're working with University of California, Davis, to do a deep dive into that database and try to pull out some information, make some correlations, and try to figure out, do we have issues going on that we need to address through training and education, and are there things that we need to work on? So we're going to be coming out with some of that information later this year and next year. We've been working on it with them for about 2 years. NASA doesn't have the money to do that kind of research and correlation, so we're going to do it for them. In his lessons learned section, he states, I should have contacted ATC a lot sooner when he was still VFR but feeling trapped. There could have been something that they could have done for him. Maybe they could have cleared him into that restricted area to make the turn and then get out of it. Maybe they could have given him a climb straight ahead to get above the cloud deck. They could have told him where the tops were. But he didn't. So he just pressed on ahead, and that was a mistake that he made. And I say he, I don't know the gender of the pilot. Honestly, that's the other part about the NASA forms. They de-identify everything. So we don't know what airports, we don't know what they're out, we don't know any of that. But just refer to it generically. The other comment made was that personal minimums, the pilot thought, well, personal minimums, I know about those. I know that as an instrument pilot, I need to have them because, maybe I don't want to go down to 200.5. Maybe I want to go to 501. Maybe I want to go to 303/4, whatever. Those are really for instrument pilots. VFR pilots, it's pretty cut and dry. It's 1,003, right? VFR, it's 1,003. That's what the reg says, right? Yeah. It's marginal VFR, right? If anybody departing today after the seminar? Not after you had the seminar, right? No, okay. But in all honesty, it's not good flying weather. 1,003 is not good flying. Even 5 miles and 3,000 feet could not be considered good flying weather, particularly on a hazy day. I had a student. We were flying. I fly out of Martinsburg, West Virginia. It's my hometown. And we were on a cross-country flight, VFR cross-country flight, departed Martinsburg, headed towards Petersburg, West Virginia, deeper into the heart of West Virginia. It was a hazy, hot, humid summer afternoon. We're in a Cessna 152, and she's flying along. We climb up, we level off at our cruising altitude. I asked her, I said, what do you think? How's it look out front? I can't really see anything. Okay. What about down? Can you see anything looking down? Yeah, sort of. So what do you want to do? I want to go back. I'm like, good choice. Why do you want to go back? I can't see anything. Great, let's make that turn. We went back, we landed, we talked about the impacts that haze can have, particularly when you're flying into the sun, on restricting your visibility and essentially putting you into IMC. It's not IMC by definition, but it is not good flying weather. So his personal minimums, he didn't really have them as a VFR pilot because he thought, again, it was cut and dried. The comment that he made was, my personal minimums for VFR should be higher than what I was flying in, and I shouldn't have taken off and done that. So when we talk about pre-flight strategies, the first thing to talk about is personal weather minimums. Was anybody here on Thursday for Jolie Lucas's Into the Mouth of the Alligator, Psychology of Flight Training? Okay. So it was a very good presentation. If you didn't see it, I'd encourage you when you get back home or get to a computer, take a look at it. It's on the AOPA website. But she's talking about creating personal minimums, and in there she says, take a very realistic inventory of what your minimums are going to be, what your capabilities are. And then her term was to decrease that. My term would be increase the minimums. So instead of 1,003, it's 3,005 or 3,010 or whatever it's going to be, but raise those up. Give yourself a margin of safety in there. And then she also talked about not cheating on your minimums. Remember this our case study pilot, dropping down 50 feet every so often as he's flying along? That is cheating on the minimums, particularly if he had them established. That would have been breaking that contract. Now, when I talk to people about filling out personal minimum contract forms or personal minimum forms, and I don't care if you use the FAA's, if you use ours, if you use somebody else's, but I do encourage you, write them down. Do write them down in pencil, because they will change over time. And one of the other things that Jolie brought out was you want to go back and review them, and every 90 days is a pretty good time frame to do that. That kind of coincides with your landing currencies. But go back and take a look at them. They may change as your experience. As you gain more experience, you may feel more comfortable lowering those to 2010 or what have you, as an example. But you could also, as you don't fly, if maybe you're off flying for a while, they want to boost them back up. When should you change your personal minimums? I mean, can I change them today? If I'm going to go fly, and it's my personal minimums today are, well, okay, I want to fly at 3,010. It's bumped up to 5 now, so maybe I can get out. Maybe can I do that? Can I make that change? No, you shouldn't do that. You should do that certainly not in the airplane while you're flying, and second, certainly not without very serious consideration of what you're doing and the kinds of consequences that you might incur from that. So, don't do that. The other thing you want to do is also set up what we call en route decision points. If the weather falls below this at some point, I'm going to execute this action. I'm going to do a turn back. I'm going to look for an area to make a precautionary landing. So you can do that. Additionally, pre-flight strategy, you want to do some thorough weather planning. And the FAA recently came out with AC 9192, which is the pilot's guide to pre-flight briefing. Since many of us are now self-briefing, we've gotten away from that structured approach that flight service brought to us whenever we'd call them. And they'd take us through the big area, the wide one over the world view and then kind of narrow it down to the flight and give us all the information. A lot of times, if we're using a tablet, if we're online sometimes, it's easy to skip some of that stuff and we kind of forget about it. So you can use that approach. You can take that big funnel approach and kind of narrow it down to what you're looking at. Start several days ahead of your flight. And this is not new information to many of you, I know. I'm hammering home some of the same stuff that we've talked about for years and years, but it's important to do that pre-flight planning. When I do it, I start and I look at the Weather Channel and I look at it a few days ahead of a lesson or a flight that I'm going to be making. And I try to get that big picture. What are things doing over time? And then I go on to 1-800-WEATHER-BRIEF or aviationweather.com and try to get that information and kind of narrow it down and look for specific things. Look at the, look for cloud cover. Where are the tops going to be? Where are the base is going to be? I use the graphic forecast analysis tool. So all that stuff, I get in there and I kind of go through that. Using this new AC, I have a better checklist to make sure I'm hitting all the things that I need to get. And that gives me the opportunity to make a good go or no-go decision. Is it bad to make a no-go decision? Let me ask this question. Is there any GA flight that you have to take off? No, none at all. I would agree with you. There might be some exceptions. Say that again? A life-threatening situation may be cause to take off when you might not want to. Okay, I'll buy that. But I don't work for a company that requires me to go fly and if I don't feel comfortable. I don't have any flight that I need to make that I would take off when the weather conditions are not meeting my personal minimums. But if you do take off, let's say you make a good go or no-go decision, and you're flying along and the weather starts to deteriorate unexpectedly or something else happens unexpectedly, well, what if? Now what do we do? So in flight, we always want to try to have an out. We've always talked about having a plan A, that's the one you're actually flying on, plan B, plan C, plan D, and you might go all the way down to Z if you're really, got a lot of options you want to consider. But make sure you have an out. Know where VFR weather is. Know where your nearest airport is. Is it going to be behind me? Is it in front of me? If I need to consider an off-airport landing, what am I looking for? I always play the game with my students. Where would you land now if the engine failed? Same question goes for flying into deteriorating weather. Where am I going to land if I get too far in? Second, going back to the FAA's statement that VFR into IMC is a true emergency, you need to recognize and accept that. Don't try to gut it out. Don't be like our case study pilot where they continue to press on into worsening weather. It's getting bad, it doesn't look good, you don't feel comfortable, turn around or land. Know your limitations, both you and the aircraft. What can I accept? What can I do? Can I get into this runway? Can I land off airport? Where do I need to go? If I land off airport, what do I need to be aware of? We're going to talk about that in a moment. And most importantly, maintain control of your aircraft. When we get nervous about things, what happens to our hand on the control yoke? We go from light touches to really wrapping it around the yoke. And what happens then? Do we maintain the sensitive control of the airplane? Can we feel it really well? Or do we overreact to stuff as we're going along? I see my students all the time wrap it right around there. And I have a trick that I use with them if they do it a lot. I'll have them weave a pencil between their fingers. And as they tighten it, it reminds them you got to have fingertip pressure. You only need 2 fingers and a thumb to fly an airplane with. At least that's what I tell my students. And it's true. If you have it trimmed properly, that's really all you need. You don't need the whole hand wrapped around there, Bugs Bunny notwithstanding. Okay? And finally, get help from ATC. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. It's an emergency. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Handbook has very good reminder for us, don't panic. If you get yourself into VFR and IMC, relax your grip, take a few deep breaths, think about it for a moment, and okay, how am I going to get out of this? Counter that fear that's going to well up in you. It's easy to get in over your head. It's easy to kind of narrow your focus down to, oh God, I gotta do something here. So take a few breaths, relax your grip, maintain control of the airplane or aircraft. Of course, that's easier said than done. I'm standing on a stage talking to you about it. You're sitting in the audience listening to me. Yeah, I could do that. I could do it. But in the airplane, how many, has anybody ever gotten into a VFR into IMC experience? Okay. All right. Did you get that pucker factor? Did you get that startle factor? Was there some tenseness that came up if you weren't expecting it?
Well, I call it a word that stop, breathe, think, and act.
Stop, breathe, think, and act. That's very good. Very good.
The condition, I was a new student with maybe about a new certificate in VFR, roller school, maybe 200 hours. And I was flying from Chicago to Minneapolis. There were no clouds above, but it was clear, and it was all VFR. And then all of a sudden, we got a helpful and it went from minimum to nothing.
Okay, so for those, all right, for those of you that are in the back that might not be able to hear that, new VFR pilot flying with about a couple hundred hours, flying from Chicago to Minneapolis, flying along, and some clouds overhead, but VFR for the most part, and then all of a sudden it went from VFR to into the clouds and 3 miles. Okay. Yeah. So. Okay, so snowing, that's a very good point. That's one of my VFR and IMC experiences. So he's flying along, 3,000 feet above him are the clouds, 5 miles visibility, then it starts snowing. It goes from that to nothing. And I had the same thing happen to me. I was taking a much shorter flight, actually going from Martinsburg, West Virginia to Hagerstown, Maryland. I was ferrying a Cessna 152 up for a maintenance flight to go get the oil changed. And about halfway there, ran into snow. And I didn't want to try to drop down and go through it, go under it, or so I turned around and came back to the airport. My boss was like, "Why isn't the airplane up there getting the oil changed?" I'm like, "Because I ran into snow." He said, "Well, why didn't you go through it?" "Because I'm not stupid, boss. I want to live." He saw my wisdom. Finally, I was still employed. We had a few words, but I took it up the next day. We got the oil change. It's only an oil change. Again, it's not a flight I have to make. So I came back. So maintain control of your aircraft. Make sure the wings are level. Again, relax, stop, breathe, think, and act, right? Very good. Fingertips only. Use your trim to your advantage. Trim the airplane so you can maintain that control. And if you have to make changes, make smooth, small changes. Okay, don't make big inputs. Nice and smooth, nice and small. And also, use and trust your instruments. When that happens, first thing you probably want to go to is go to that attitude indicator. Make sure your wings are level. Make sure you're not in a climb or a descent. Get the airplane stabilized, and then confirm all the rest of the information. Look at the other instruments, and then come back to your attitude indicator. Don't look outside. Why? You might not be able to see anything. You might get confused with what you're looking at. That horizon, that cloud is sloped a little bit. And so, I need to level my wings. Well, no, you're actually turning. So use your instruments, trust and believe in them. And if you have an autopilot on board and know how to use it, by all means, go ahead and engage it. Use every tool available to you to help you out of this emergency situation. Okay, remember, it is an emergency. So let's talk about that turn thing. We've taught for years, and it's in the ASI VFR and IMC syllabus. I'll talk about that in a moment. But it's in there to make that level 180-degree turn to get out of the IMC. There's a tendency sometimes to over-control. Remember, our case study pilot went into a 20-degree bank angle. On the face of it, it sounds like a reasonable bank angle, right? It sounds like you should be making that. It's not a full 30-degree bank. It's kind of closer to a standard rate turn. That's okay. The airplane should still be controllable. But the pilot had some concerns with it. He started to get some illusions and started to feel like he was going out of control. And if you keep it smaller than that, maybe 10 degrees of bank, it's easier to deal with that instability. So you can make that, and if you have to make that full 180-degree turn, make it in smaller increments. You know, turn maybe 30 or 40 degrees, wings level. Okay, still good. Still at the same altitude. All right, let's turn some more until you get to where you need to be. All right, and just do that as you fly through, and that should hopefully get you out of it. If it doesn't, now we have to do some other things. Maybe you want to climb or descend. Same thing. You want to make small changes. Raise the nose or lower it 1 bar width, max. Remember our case study pilot, he took a 5-degree pitch up attitude to get out of the clouds. He did that because it wasn't going to give him an excessively nose-high pitch attitude. It would still keep him, you know, flying pretty well. It wasn't going to get too close to his critical angle of attack and stall. You want to add some power. Add it, again, in small increments, 100 RPMs or an inch of manifold pressure. Just slowly get that in there. Regardless of what you end up with, just accept that speed. You're going to be in a trimmed condition anyhow. Get that power in there and just start to climb. And then, of course, we all know when we pitch the nose up, what happens, and you add power, what happens? Where's the nose go if you're not paying attention to it? You're going to yaw to the left. So be prepared for that and get the right rudder in there and get that in there early. Keep yourself coordinated. Descent, same thing. Reduce the power, lower the nose slightly, and, you know, get down to your altitude that you're looking for. Get below the clouds or what have you, wherever you're shooting for. In all of this, keep your wings level. Why am I not advocating a climbing or descending turn? You're just going to increasing the chance that you may get yourself out of control. So do one maneuver at a time. Either climb or turn. And if you're talking to ATC, and we're going to talk about this here, when you talk to ATC and they ask you to do something, tell them, I'm going to do this first, and then I'm going to climb first, and then I'm going to turn. And you're the pilot in command, you can tell them that. But you can also tell them if they ask you to do something that you're unable to do, tell them I'm unable, or stand by, or, you know, just let them know you're dealing with stuff right there. When you call ATC, you know, if you're not talking to them already, 121.5 is a good frequency to go to get that help. They'll probably get you over to a discrete frequency if possible. If you were on another frequency talking to them before you got into trouble and you hadn't talked to them for a while, you could go back to that if you're not too far away. But if you're looking for a frequency to find that, to call them on, you pick up your tablet or you pick up your chart, pick it up and move it to your sight line in front of you and the instruments, between you and the instruments. Okay? Don't put your head down to find stuff. Don't induce the motion in your ear canals of that fluid going in there and getting yourself into an illusion that you're doing something else. Keep everything as nice and stable as you possibly can. If you are talking to ATC, declare an emergency right then and there. Just tell them, hey, mayday, mayday, mayday. I'm a VFR pilot, or I'm a VFR pilot. I'm in IMC. I need to get out of it. I need to get to VFR immediately. I need help. And, you know, give them whatever information they're looking for. Comply with their instructions to the best of your ability. But again, do not be afraid to say unable, or I'm going to, you know, tell them how you're going to do it. I'm going to do this first and then that. Again, it says avoid maneuvering to minimize the potential loss of control. Be careful with that, all right? The International Helicopter Safety Team has what they call the 4 C's, similar to our friend's stuff over here, which is control, climb, course, and communicate. So, of course, in control, maintain control of the aircraft. Make sure it's in a level pitch attitude, a level flight attitude, wings level, straight ahead. You know, if you're going to climb, then go ahead and initiate a climb, or you're going to descend. You know, climb is the next thing, because helicopters are operating very close to the ground, so there's a better chance for them to get into trouble smacking into either terrain or obstructions or things like that. So they want to climb, and that's probably a very good habit to get into, is to climb away. The more distance you put between yourself and the ground, the better. So what is something you can use when you're doing your pre-flight planning to make sure that you know how high you need to get? How many still use paper charts? How many use electronic charts and see this on the electronic chart? And maximum elevation figure? What does that show us? Well, it shows you it's not necessarily minimum safe altitude, but it is the altitude, the highest point in that quadrant There's a little bit of a fudge factor there, a little bit of a safety factor there. So yeah, if you were at that, you'd probably be okay. But I'd like to go a little bit higher than that. So if I'm flying in a quadrant that has a 46 in there, I'm going to be up at 5,000. 46 is 4,600 feet. Okay. And then there's third C is course. You want to turn on course, and finally communicate. But you can see in there, aviate, navigate, communicate, that's represented in there. Control, climb, course, communicate. Hopefully they've done the stop, breathe, think, and act before that. So how do we avoid IMC? Well, make sure you have the latest forecast when you depart. Call for that update briefing. Check your tablet, make sure your electronic weather, you've got that. And if you're using a tablet to do that, make sure you're connected to the internet, you're not looking at old stuff. Refresh it, make sure you've got that. Avoid marginal VFR. If you can see that in the reports and the forecasts, don't believe that it's going to improve. Be cynical. I know we're happy-go-lucky folks, but be cynical. It's not going to improve. Take that attitude with it. Don't trust that it will. Check your weather ahead. If you're in flight, you can talk to ATC, get them to give you updates on your weather as you're going along your course. Or if you have data link weather in the cockpit, go ahead and use that. And there's still flight service out there, so give them a call if you need to, get some updates from them. Again, we talked about en-route decision points. So, pick criteria that if you're flying along on your flight, you get into a situation and it gets worse than that criteria. If it goes below that criteria, that's a decision point. That's that I need to do something. Maybe it's turn around, maybe it's land off airport, whatever, land at another airport. And understand what deteriorating weather looks like. What does obscuration look like? I mean, this is a great, like I said, I arranged for this to happen so I could talk about it. But, hazy day like today, that's tough to fly, particularly if you're flying into the sun. Precipitation, snow, rain, mist, that's all going to be difficult to fly through. So if you see that and you see it up ahead, start to look for it and do something now to turn around and get out of it. Fog, if you start to see like shreddy clouds below you as you're flying along, what do you think is going to happen a little bit further as you fly along? This deck might be closing in beneath you. It's going to get worse. Again, now's the time to take action, turn around, get out of that, go to a VFR area. So look for the warning signs, land or turn around. And let's talk about precautionary landings. Now, this information comes from the Helicopter Association International. While it is it's applicable to helicopters, it's also very applicable to airplanes and other aircraft. So they have a Land and Live initiative. It's a very good tool. You can find it on their website that has a lot of information about it. But in essence, it's all about saving lives. Your life, the life of your passengers, the life of people on the ground. Because sometimes we may not think about that when we're trying to decide where we're going to put the aircraft in a precautionary off-airport landing. But commit to land and live. If the weather is deteriorating around me, I need to land, I want to live. It's okay to do that. So in their tool, they talk about assessing the level of urgency. Do I need to land now? Can I turn around and land at the airport that was behind me? What do I need to do? And then when they talk about choosing a spot to land, they're talking about things like making sure that the approach into the area is good. If you choose to land on a road, what can you expect? What is always on a road? What's always around a road? Power lines, signs, trees, bridges, all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of obstructions. So if you choose a road, be very mindful of that and look to make sure that you can avoid it. What about an open field? Is that better?
Yeah, well, it could be water.
Could be water, could be soft, right? So could be cows in the field, right? Or hay bales. But you can land and you can figure out the rest of it, how to get the aircraft out of there, how to get yourselves to safety once you're safely landed, once you're on the ground. Again, land and live. So that's HAI's advice, and it's very good. Some other things you can do to improve your ability to get out of or avoid a VFR into IMC situation is incorporate training into your personal proficiency plan. How many of you actually train to and fly by reference only to instruments during during the year? I mean, if you're not instrument rated, how many of you actually put the foggles on, have a safety pilot, and fly by reference to instruments? Or hop into a simulator, do the same thing? Okay, a few of you, that's good. Commit to doing that at least every 6 months or every 3 months. Plan for that when you go to make a proficiency flight. I talked about we have an ASI VFR into IMC syllabus that's available on our website, airsafetyinstitute.org. If you look under publications, you scroll down a little bit, you'll find that. But we have some ground and some flight training and some scenarios that you can use to get yourself prepared for the possibility of unintentional VFR into IMC. And how can I get out of that? So you can practice that. Scenario-based training for my flight instructors out there, and for all of you actually. Think about putting together a scenario of how are you going to get out of this particular worsening situation. Use weather. You can go, with the tablets, you can go to any airport in the country, and you can set up a cross-country flight on there and import real-time weather and talk about how is this going to affect you, and where would you make your turnaround, and what are you going to think about. And you can take that and you can put that into the simulator. If you have access to a sim, those are great for being able to set up worsening weather. And I'm fortunate enough to have access to a couple different simulators where I work, and I do that with my students. I'll take them out there and I'll show them, okay, this is 3 miles in haze. We can do it on a regular day too. We can go fly. Have any of you had an instructor take you up into IMC conditions as part of your training when you're going through your private pilot training? A few of you instrument training, some of you guys that are instrument ready, obviously you're going to try to go get actual instrument time, but that's good stuff. And if you haven't done it, go get an instructor. Go out there and on a bad day, or not a bad day, but on a day that's less than VFR, go fly and see what it looks like. Experience flying into that. It is different. There's a startle factor to it if you're not prepared for it. So get those experiences. Understand how that is going to affect you and how you can maintain control of the aircraft and get yourself out of that situation. And again, the last item there is add an instrument rating. Now we know that unless you maintain proficiency and your currency with an instrument rating, it may not help you. We have 30% of the pilots in the fatal accidents were instrument rated. So it's not a cure-all unless you exercise it and you use it and you maintain that proficiency. If you don't, yes, you may have had some training in the past and you may be able to draw on that, but I'm not going to make a guarantee that you're going to get out of it okay. And I don't want to talk about you guys in my safety seminars. I really don't. I'd rather talk about happy, positive stuff, like this guy that got out of it because he did some of the right things. So to sum this up, set realistic personal minimums and stick to them. Don't change them in flight. Don't cheat on them. And talk about your personal minimums with your flight instructor. If you fly regularly with somebody, talk to them about it. I had a boss who was a Navy fighter pilot, lots of carrier landings, flying at night, all that kind of stuff. But he would not fly single engine. He would not fly past dusk. And the reason he didn't fly past dusk is that his wife was not comfortable with it. Okay, so they made it a point. They were down before dusk, no matter where they were flying. He left us, and irony is now he flies for UPS, flies mostly at night, but but that's a good personal minimum. So if you have a flying buddy, a friend with flying benefits, a spouse, a significant other, somebody, get their input. Will you feel comfortable if we do this? Will you not feel comfortable? What do you, how can I make sure you have a good flight? All right, scrutinize your forecast and report, identify and avoid marginal VFR, forecast marginal VFR, and make sure that you remember that it's probably not going to improve, even if it says it will. Be cynical. And again, you don't have to depart just because you want to get home. You can delay that departure. You can take another night somewhere. You can stay on the ground for a couple hours. En route, don't press on. I had my family on board flying down to my in-laws in North Carolina. Actually, we were flying back from North Carolina to Martinsburg. And right across my route of flight was a big thunderstorm, big cell. And I was like, I want to land before that. So we landed at South Boston, Virginia. I didn't want to talk to the control or to the flight service in the air, try to figure things out while I'm trying to fly the airplane and manage my family and get the weather and kind of figure it out. I landed at the airport. I set it down, put the kids in the FBO, go run around, get some snacks, get some water, whatever. My wife, go to the bathroom, sit down, relax. I'm going to call flight service. I'm going to find out what's going on. And we're talking about it, like, well, if you stay there for about another hour, hour and a half, it'll all move through, and you can go up, and you'll have smooth air behind it, and it'll be all clear. And sure enough, we stayed there, played around for a little while, let the kids run around, we'll look at airplanes, and then loaded them back up when everything had passed through, flew home, beautiful flight home. If you need to, and you need to because VFR into IMC is what? An emergency. Declare that emergency, okay? Don't hesitate to do that. Call up ATC and let them know you're in trouble and you need help. Don't be a statistic. Don't be the topic of one of my future safety seminars. Please, I beg you. Remember the 4 C's: control, climb, course, and communicate. Remember, stop, breathe, think, and act, right? Okay, stop, breathe, think, and act? All right. I'm going to have to add that for my next talk, but I appreciate that. And finally, file an NASA form so we can all learn from your experience. What did you do right? What did you think you didn't do right? How can you improve this? We're all in this together, and by filing that NASA form, we can help other pilots stay safe and fly safe and enjoy what we all enjoy.